Where I'm from, statistics tell stories that outsiders can't decode. Our borough of 8,000 souls might not register on national maps, but we stack bodies at a rate that would make headlines if anyone outside gave a damn. Welcome to what we call the American Favela Forgotten Blocks, where good people navigate impossible choices in landscapes shaped by generational neglect. Marcus wasn't born special, just another hood child who somehow dodged the traps that swallowed his peers. By 30, he'd secured what passed for stability in our world. 2 jobs that kept bill collectors at bay, a modest 2-bedroom with working locks, and enough left over to occasionally taste what mainstream America calls normal life. His marriage to Shauna 5 years back had brought her younger brother Darnell into his orbit. From day one, their relationship carried that specific tension that emerges when a self-made man encounters raw potential paired with self-destruction. Marcus saw in 19-year-old Darnell both what he might have become and what he'd fought to escape. Trying to mentor that boy is like trying to baptize a cat. He listening, but he ain't hearing me. Darnell moved with that distinctive hunger you recognize in the young ones who haven't yet learned patience. Corner boys watched him with knowing eyes. They'd seen his type before, too smart for the block but too restless for the slow climb out. His timeline for success operated at warp speed while opportunity crawled at a generational pace. Marcus wasn't flashy, but he permitted himself select luxuries that marked incremental victories over his circumstances. Chief among them, a PlayStation he'd stacked checks for 3 months to acquire. Gaming wasn't just entertainment, it represented his reward system, social outlet, and decompression chamber after grinding double shifts. When he returned home that Tuesday to find his door carefully reset, but the energy all wrong inside, he knew immediately. The PlayStation's absence left a physical void on his entertainment stand, but the real violation extended beyond missing plastic and circuits. It took half a day to confirm what he already knew. Word traveled back through neighborhood channels. Darnell had been flexing the console at a friend's spot, running his mouth about how his brother-in-law could afford another one anyway. Family business stays family business in our world. No police reports, no official channels. Marcus tracked Darnell to his usual corner haunt and administered street justice, measured enough to communicate the gravity of boundaries crossed without permanently damaging his wife's brother. Blood don't mean you get to disrespect mine. I catch you touching my shit again, they won't find all your pieces. The PlayStation never returned, likely converted to cash within hours of its acquisition. But Marcus considered the matter settled after making his point. Family disputes happen. Consequences get administered. Life continues its grind. 7 days passed. Marcus, moving forward, allocated his next check toward replacing what was stolen. The new console arrived, took its place, became again the center of his rare downtime. 3 days later, history repeated with one crucial difference. This time, the theft wasn't just about acquisition, it was declaration. Mrs. Jenkins from 3B had seen Darnell let himself in with a copied key, emerging 30 minutes later with the unmistakable shape under his arm. But more damning than the physical evidence was what came after. Darnell playing those same stolen games at a spot just blocks from Marcus's building, making no effort to conceal his prize. When confronted by phone, Darnell crossed into territory from which there's rarely return in neighborhoods like ours. "What you gonna do about it? You already beat my ass once. That shit don't bother me. I'll just take another one next month." In that moment, the material value of a gaming console evaporated completely. What remained was something far more dangerous, a public challenge to manhood, to authority, to respect. The PlayStation became merely symbolic of deeper violations that, left unchecked, threatened everything Marcus had built. Boy put me in a corner, made it neighborhood business now. Made it so everyone watching what happens next. Terrell recognized the shift immediately. In the American favela, perception crystallizes into reality within hours. If word spreads that your warnings can be ignored, that your space can be violated without consequence, that family can publicly disrespect you, everything else unravels. Your safety, your standing, your ability to move through spaces without challenge, all depend on maintaining boundaries that cannot be breached without response. What you thinking? I'm thinking some lessons can't be taught twice. Every tragedy contains its point of no return, the moment where alternative paths vanish, and momentum carries events toward their inevitable conclusion. For Darnell, that threshold arrived with a phone call Marcus placed from the bathroom of Smokey's bar. Voice dropped low enough that even Terrell couldn't catch the exchange. Darnell's final hours unfolded with cruel, ordinary rhythm. He moved through neighborhood spaces with the casual confidence unique to youth, oblivious to the machinery now turning around him. He ran ball at the community court, debated last season's playoffs, made plans with a girl from the east side he'd been pursuing. By late afternoon, he relaxed in the passenger seat of his homeboy's Civic, windows down despite October's bite, speakers pushing bass-heavy tracks loud enough that several witnesses later claimed they registered neither approaching footsteps nor the presence of a shadow until muzzle flash illuminated gathering dusk. 8 shots, methodical precision, no wasted movement. The shooter neither rushed nor hesitated. The driver, spared by mere inches, abandoned the vehicle in blind panic. Darnell, struck multiple times in patterns designed for slow rather than immediate fatality, slumped against the door as his executor disappeared into the network of cuts and alleys that vein through our neighborhood like capillaries. What followed speaks volumes about our community's complex relationship with authority. The car remained where it was, driver's door ajar, music eventually fading as the battery surrendered. Darnell remained inside, life leaking away over hours rather than minutes due to calculated shot placement. Residents who heard the shots followed, established protocol. They confirmed their own loved one's safety, secured their doors, closed their blinds. They understood that intervention meant involvement, and involvement carried its own potentially fatal consequences. So the car sat like a modern-day coffin, untouched, unreported as evening deepened into absolute night. It wasn't until the following morning, nearly 12 hours later, that an anonymous call finally brought authorities to the scene. By then, Darnell had been dead for hours, body stiffening in a vehicle that served as both crime scene and temporary mausoleum. The official investigation moved with the half-hearted mechanism typical of homicides in places like ours. Detectives canvassed, questions circulated, paperwork accumulated. But without witnesses willing to speak, without community cooperation, the case cooled before it generated heat. Within weeks, it joined the stacks of unsolved killings that pile up around forgotten communities like emotional debt. Marcus never spoke of it. He neither celebrated nor mourned publicly. The following Sunday, he attended family dinner at his mother-in-law's house, sat across from Darnell's empty chair, and passed dishes when requested. His wife Shauna cycled between tears and hollow-eyed silence. Her mother stared at plates that remained largely untouched. No accusations materialized, no questions emerged. They all knew. Their silence contained the tacit acknowledgement of parallel justice systems that govern spaces abandoned by conventional authority, systems merciless in efficiency, absolute in finality. The real story, however, continues beyond crime scene tape and casket lowering. Marcus changed after that night. Whatever satisfaction he might have expected from restoring respect never materialized. Instead, something essential altered behind his eyes. He worked his shifts, returned to his apartment, occasionally played on the PlayStation that had cost his brother-in-law's life, but the victory he'd imagined evaporated before it could be grasped. None of it was worth it. All that over fucking plastic, but worth had never truly entered the equation. In the American favela, actions follow their own gravitational logic born from environments where conventional options narrow to pinpricks of possibility. Marcus hadn't weighed Darnell's life against gaming equipment. He'd responded to challenges against his fundamental standing in a world where standing often represents the final possession that can't be stripped away. This story isn't unique. Only details shift. A PlayStation becomes borrowed money never returned, becomes disrespect shown in public spaces, becomes thousand other sparks that ignite in environments primed for combustion. The kindling remains constant. Opportunity deserts, resource absence, communities designed through policy neglect to contain rather than cultivate. We call it the American favela because euphemisms help no one. These aren't simply challenged neighborhoods or underserved communities. They are internal colonies within the wealthiest nation on earth, places where American promises feel like cruel jokes told at the expense of those trapped within invisible borders. Yet amid harshness, humanity persists. The same blocks that produce these tragedies also birth artists, entrepreneurs, community anchors, and everyday heroes who nurture others despite their own deprivation. For every story ending like Darnell's, others demonstrate remarkable resilience and transcendence. But we serve no one by sanitizing reality. The American favela exists. Its internal codes, however destructive, make perfect sense within contexts of their creation. And until we address conditions generating these parallel worlds of possibility and consequence, the stories continue. PlayStation today, something else tomorrow, all variations on fundamental themes of pride, survival, and the terrible cost of respect in places where it remains the only consistent currency.